All right, welcome to another special edition of the Data Insights
Mhm.
podcast, where we're focusing on Women's History Month. And I am joined today by Mallory Elias-Cvengros, who is a customer success data analyst. And we're super excited to have you on the show today, Mallory. Thank you so much for joining us. Um, we'd love to jump into just some about your background. Tell us how you've gotten into the roles that you've been in within data analytics and what your current role and responsibilities are.
Absolutely. And thank you for having me. So I have always been kind of a mathy, nerdy numbers kid. So there's no surprise, I think, in where I've ended up. But I actually got really burnt out on math in high school and ended up going to undergrad for marketing. But in my first role, I was at a company that did kind of customer experience analytics, those old school surveys that were on every receipt you got at every major retailer. And I was just fascinated by the fact that they could take all of these survey responses and really start to predict behavior and help companies, find areas to improve for their customers. And so, just the predictive nature of that, kind of like that mix of psychology and data, motivated me to go back to school for a degree in predictive analytics. And so I have a master's in technically it's market analytics. Predictive analytics was kind of a new degree at the time. So it sounds like not at all what it is, but it's kind of a mix of statistics and then the business application of that type of modeling. So I spent a few years doing marketing analytics, making sure you're getting the best junk mail and ads that are the most relevant to you instead of just all of them. But then I really wanted to pivot to something that was just kind of more close to my heart, going back to my roots and go back to more of that customer experience. And that's where I met you, Serena. And so I pivoted to being a CX analyst and really using customer feedback to make improvements within organizations. And so right now, that is what I'm doing. I'm on the customer success team, and I am building churn models to predict, customer churn, and then tying those to customer feedback to identify the pain points that most likely lead to churn, to help make improvements in policies and in tech, so also in our products to some degree. And yeah, that's where I'm sitting right now.
Awesome. And just to be clear, we were on a team together, but where you're at now is a different.
Yes,
Okay.
I'm in a different org now. We've both gone off in different directions,
Yeah.
but yeah, yep.
I love to. I will say the survey design and the best way to ask questions was definitely something that I learned from you that has carried through to where we are now, and making sure that I think one of the biggest things that I think a lot of companies do when they design surveys is they ask more than one question in a question, and that
Yeah.
leads to some data issues when it comes back
Ab-
around.
Absolutely. Those are always the two biggest things. So in designing like an NPS program or a more more thorough relationship survey, those are always the two main things that I ask people are first, what decisions are you trying to make with these survey questions? Because once you're doing the back end analytics, think about how many survey invites you get
Yeah,
in a day, in a week, from companies. You want them to be quick and direct, and you want to take up as little time as possible and make them as actionable as possible. So instead of saying, what do you want to ask? It's always, what are we trying to learn? What decision are we trying to make?
yeah,
And then design the questions from there. And then to your point, when you design them, if you say, how friendly and helpful were we? Well, you might have been really friendly, but you didn't actually help me at all, or vice versa. You might have been super helpful, but really mean about it. So you do need to be careful when you're doing survey design that you're only asking about one thing.
yeah. I love that. It's I start with the outcome first and work your
Yeah,
way back to what that question is that you want to ask.
absolutely.
Well, tell us a little bit more about what excites you in the role that you're in now and the impact that you can have on your organization.
Yeah, for sure. So, one of the things, I'm running the NPS program, which did exist before I came on board, but we're also building a voice of customer program, which relies a lot more heavily on the feedback, because having a score is great for, kind of taking the temperature of where you're at, identifying if there are some major gaps either within your customer segments, or, maybe you had a new rollout that just kind of bombed. So being able to track the score of an NPS program is great. There are pros and cons of NPS specifically as the metric compared to other possibilities. I can debate either side of that. Again, like as far as taking the temperature, I think any standard score, as long as you continuously ask it in the same way, can be useful. But really gathering that customer feedback and then tying that to operational data is where my passion lies in helping orgs. So when you can take these scores customers are giving you and then the specific reasons that they're giving you for those scores and start categorizing it and then tying it back to how did they actually behave, because we know people will say one thing and do another. So then how much are they spending with you? What does their churn look like? Are they adding on additional products and features and things like that? Or are there certain features that customers share that tend to have lower scores versus higher scores? Being able to look at all of that operational data linked up to the feedback you're getting from customers, I think is really that sweet spot in keeping yourself ahead of your competitors.
Yeah, and I agree. And just for the listeners that aren't aware, NPS, when we're talking about that, is the Net Promoter Score.
Yes,
One of
thank
the
you.
key metrics that customer success and experience teams tend to look after, but as you pointed out, Mallory, there's some debate on whether that's actually an accurate
Yeah, I think
metric to
it can
use.
be really great in certain situations, and there are others where it's not as appropriate. But I think a lot of people in the industry have been debating the merits of Net Promoter Score versus customer satisfaction (CSAT). Customer effort score (CES) is a new player in the game that's getting a lot of attention. So that's a fun kind of over coffee or happy hour debate to have with other data nerds.
Absolutely. Yeah, I I love exactly what you said though. It's not so much about the metric itself, but what does that number correlated with the feedback, correlated with their behavior actually mean to your organization?
Exactly. It comes back to, and this is a fight that I've had, an uphill battle of customer feedback programs in the past, where a lot of times leaders in an organization will go back to that kind of Henry Ford. If you ask people what they wanted in transportation, they would have said faster horses. Um, Absolutely, people don't always know what they want or what they need, but if you take their feedback and again, you look at the operational metrics to see how it actually plays out, but also you approach it from a solutions perspective. So if a customer says, I want X feature, but then you have 50 customers saying, I want these individual features, but they're all kind of trying to accomplish the same goal, then you start to realize here's what our actual problem is. And then your experts internally can brainstorm those issues to find the right solution to address the
Yeah.
problems, as opposed to just, listening verbatim to every individual customer.
Yeah, feedback at face value isn't even always accurate enough to make
Exactly.
assumptions. Yeah,
Exactly. It's just a really good guide to where you need to be making improvements.
for sure. Well, let's pivot a little bit
Yep.
on this role that you're in is amazing and it's super nerdy as you mentioned. How do you see that with women being in these roles? And do you see a lot of is it more male dominated or do you see more women joining it? And how do you feel that women in these types of roles are shaping the future of the fields?
Sure. So, I don't see a lot of women but doing specifically what I'm doing, but I also don't see a lot of people doing specifically what I'm
True.
doing.
Yeah.
There's kind of a bridge between, the like UX departments in tech, um, data folks, whether they sit in like a marketing org or a finance org, and then customer experience, customer success teams. And I consider myself kind of the bridge there. So there aren't a lot of folks doing that. But But what I do see is the more analytical folks do tend to be male. And as we know, that's an issue with getting more women into STEM. But then a lot of the people in the CX, the customer success, even like in the marketing, tend to be women. So it's an interesting place to bring all of that together. But from the data perspective, the analytics perspective, I do realize that I have to often kind of fold in my credentials into conversations early on. Once people get to know me, and you can build that trust, it hasn't really been an issue. But coming to the table, I also have tended to look younger than I am, and that's why I'm growing in the gray. But that has been a thing that even some of my former managers and mentors have said, like, and you're coming into this leadership meeting to talk numbers, so I'm going to give your education and background because
Mm,
I think it'll just clear a little bit of the way. So I think that's unfortunate. That, I mean, obviously that happens to everybody, but I do
yeah,
think it happens to women more frequently. And so you really have to come in with kind of this attitude of, I know what I'm talking about.
yeah,
This is what the data says. I'm not going to be emotional about it, and which is kind of nice because, I mean, they say numbers don't lie. I think you can make numbers lie, unfortunately.
yes,
But, as long as you come to the table with this is what the data says, that that's what it is. There's nothing I can do about it. You can get mad at me, and
yeah,
and kind of play that ball game of what I think that kind of like historically men's game of just that's what it is, the end. I think that helps, but I do think this kind of CX perspective combined with data is really great, having more of that
yeah.
like historically female empathy, perspective to it. Not that men aren't empathetic, but I just think, there's a reason that there's so many women in customer success and things like that. And I think that's why it's a great bridge.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. I love to your point about kind of walking into that room with the confidence that you know the data, you know exactly what it says, what it doesn't say, and you have every right to be at that table that everyone else does.
Yeah, and I think, unfortunately, sometimes, you have to put on maybe a little bit more of a show.
Yeah.
Being a woman at that table and a woman talking about numbers at the table, I have been accused of, or maybe it has been said in my reviews, that I have aggressive integrity when it comes to data. um, and so I take that as a compliment, but I think that's also something that you have to really stand firm, because often, when you're bringing numbers to the table that are going to go in front of the board or,
Yeah.
get published, there's an interest in, not lying, but saying like, well, can we like segment this in a different way or look at a
Hmm.
specific group of customers to try to, you know, put the spin on it that is the best possible light, or even, internally with teams to say, I really want to focus on X, Y, and Z in our roadmap this year. Can we just see the data that applies to that? And I think, you really have to take a stance on being, the person that puts their foot down in those kinds of situations, because it's a slippery slope.
Yeah.
And, people can, especially when you're a woman, think that there's more room for, you potentially being a pushover. So you really have to stand your ground.
I think when you think of the phrasing data analytics, it seems innately very logical, but there are very many things that could be subjective that you connect to it. So
Absolutely.
yeah, it can absolutely be spun in different ways to tell a story that you're interested in telling rather than
Yeah.
one that it actually is.
Yeah. I think everybody's probably seen, memes online of ridiculous graphs, or, especially during like election years, different ways the data is presented. Um, there's so many ways that you can look at things. Correlations versus causations, where people really want to say like, this happened because this other thing happened, and you really have to step them back. um, Another big piece of a role in analytics like this is being able to make sense of the data and tell people what it means. So you can do reports all day long, but being able to actually pull out those business insights and saying, here's the data, and then translating that to simplify it for folks that don't have maybe as much of that background, but to say, here's how I did it at a very high level. Here's what it says. This is what that means for us, or these are the actions we need to take. And I think for anyone trying to grow a career in analytics, that tends to be the growth arc of you start very just numbers focused and you just want to report all these numbers and they're cool and they're interesting and they're fun, but you really have to be able to translate that to folks at all different levels of the company, at in all different like verticals, and be able to use expertise that you're only going to get after years of kind of being in the
Yeah.
field, but to pull those insights out and say, here's what we need to do with it.
Yeah, I think that's an interesting point too, kind of the maturity of that. And I think that's exactly what we're seeing kind of in this AI business now
Yeah.
too, is the fact that we've started off with just the math and being able to solve the problem with, logical sense. But now we're
Yep.
trying to get to the point where we can be predictive and proactive with the insights that are coming out of those analytics as well.
Absolutely. And another big thing, and I think this is a data issue as a whole, more than just for women in data, but as we're getting all these awesome tools that can do these like incredible things, making sure we're checking ourselves. Like, I have been involved with text analytics for years and years and years, and it's come so far. Like, it blows my mind because it used
Hmm.
to just be maybe sentiment, and if a comment had a good and a bad, it was going to be worthless in the analytics program. And now it can figure all of that out, and that's great. But some of the concerns that I have are, it's easier to maybe hire somebody who doesn't have as much advanced training and education in a very specific data science that can then pump numbers into an AI tool and get some predictive results. But knowing if the results you're getting are correct or not, and knowing what the tool is doing to get from A to B, I think, as so many people are worried about what this means for jobs in the
Yeah.
future, I think that this is another space that is something I'm concerned about, because I've been given some amazing tools to work with in my time, in my career, and some of them, though they, you have other people on the table saying, well, I threw some numbers in and it looks like this is the cause of our churn. And it's like, there's no way it was that simple.
Yeah.
We need to actually see what it's doing. And if it's something that's just kind of a black box, it's really scary of, as data driven decision making becomes kind of the catchphrase for organizations globally, making sure they're using that data correctly is a big risk, I think.
Yeah. And I think that goes back to, at least at this point in the game still, you need that human element to
Absolutely.
be able to validate and test and to your point, make sure there's enough experience in that person to judge whether or not that's a correct answer or not.
Exactly. Validate, test, and then, as we were saying before, pulling out those insights, because even then, the machine can give you all kinds of great data, but then how it applies to your business is another layer that's
Yes.
that's not going to be there.
Yeah. Well, you talked a little bit about some of the challenges that you faced as a woman as you kind of walk into some of those rooms and are talking numbers. I guess, have there been any mentors who have significantly influenced your career or have helped you kind of get past some of those barriers and roadblocks?
Absolutely. I have been very lucky in my career to have some amazing leaders, mentors. Even starting my earliest career, I was on the data side of things and really wanted to get into that translation of data into results. And I had someone in that first role that gave me a chance at being on the consulting side. So I was kind of doing the data and the consulting, which is where my heart has been ever since, really. And he was great at just putting me in the room. So, I was probably 25, 26, and I was talking to, senior directors and VP level folks at huge organizations. And he was always there. And but always, deferring to me because I was the one doing the data work. So even if, they kept directing questions at him, he would always steer the conversation back. And he was one of those great leaders that was always willing to take the blame if something did go wrong, but give the credit to when, for the work that other folks were doing. So, that was the huge first jump for me in my career. And then since then, I've had, I think for me, that's a great manager. They're kind of the buffer. They kind of handle the politics for you and let you kind of go and do your thing. And as somebody who loves being in the data and isn't really interested in being a people manager or, moving up the ladder a lot higher, that's something that I have always just truly cherished because I think that allows me to do my best work.
Mm-hmm.
So, as you alluded before, we don't work together now, but you absolutely are one of those people. I mean, you had built our CX team from the ground where we worked together and just, always gave us so much visibility. And we had a great team at our previous org together where, we could rely on each other. We each kind of had our own specialty. I was the data person and you're just kind of like, this is what we need, just run with it. And I think having bosses that you have that have that trust in you, and that you can rely on is just, if you don't, I would say to anybody in their career, if you don't have that with your immediate leaders, start looking for something else because it's going to not only grow your career leaps and bounds and give you the confidence to be a better version of yourself, but it's also, your life is going to be vastly more enjoyable.
Oh, well, thank you for that. And also, that was definitely not a planted question.
No, yeah, I saw it, and you let me peek at some of the questions for you, and just so I could
Yeah.
prepare, and I was like, well, I have to embarrass her a little bit, but
Well, thank
absolutely
you.
true.
Well, it's a good thing I'm wearing this bright pink shirt, so the face just flushes with it. I think you've alluded to a few of these, but what are some of those key skills or attributions that have helped contribute to the success that you've had in these roles?
Sure. So I am very detail focused, and I think I work well in groups, but I think I work the best alone. So I can kind of be given something and then just dive down the rabbit hole of the data, and then I'm lucky that my brain does just kind of work in a way that those pieces kind of fit together for me. Um, of that the data and the insights. But I think, as far as like skills to focus on, um, besides, like I said, just the integrity, standing your ground, um, always checking your work many, many times, because that can be really hard in data. But really, I just feel like doing what you're passionate about is the best way. So, no one's going to say like, well, not no one, but I love my job. It's the best thing ever. Would I still be doing this if I, won the lottery? But like it's just it's the most fun that I've ever had getting paid to do something. And actually, now that I say that, I have done this kind of work for friends that had like startups and things for free. So yeah, I probably would still be doing it at least some degree. um, but finding that thing that fits for you and that just makes sense, and then fighting for it. The like I said, the role in which I tend to sit of this bridge is not one that has been around for a long time or even still exists in a lot of places. Um, right out of grad school, I was asked when I got a job in marketing analytics, like, where do you see yourself in 5 or 10 years with this company? And I said, well, you've got this great analytics team, but you've also got these teams that are doing the customer surveys, the feedback, the marketing
Mm-hmm.
insights.
Yeah.
Um, I want to do both. I think there should be a bridge there. And I think it's crazy that these teams don't, work together and
Yeah.
combine all of this information. And, 10 years later, then that's pretty much exactly what I'm responsible for. So I think finding those gaps and then identifying the needs and then filling them is really the best thing that you can do. So it's not specific to my personality, but I think it's finding that place that you fit that is how to be the most successful.
It's great. Yeah, I think so often there's the statistic out there that women won't apply for a job if they don't meet 100%
Yeah,
criteria that's on it. And I think that so often what we actually just need to remember is to be curious about what all of that entails and how we can use our strengths to fill that.
exactly. And I have found a lot of success in not only applying when I don't necessarily meet all the
Yeah.
criteria, but coming to the table and saying, this is what the description says. It's kind of like with the survey design. This is what you said you want, but here's what I think you actually need for this position, and here's how I fit it. And then
Yeah.
for that gap that maybe I don't have in my background, here's how I plan to accomplish that and to learn those other things that you need. Right. So,
Yeah.
right now, the tool that we are using for all of our surveys and things, I had only used minimally in the past, and they wanted the analytics person to also be an administrator for that. So I'm like,
Yeah.
sure, why not? And the thing that I said going into the interview was, I have all of these years of experience in analytics and insights and predictive modeling. Learning to be an admin for this type of tool is pretty straightforward training of I know what needs to be done. It's just where are the buttons to
Yes.
make it happen in the tool. That's a lot easier to learn than learning all of the, the
Yeah.
predictive stuff and the insights and having the experience. So that was, really my sales pitch for the role, and it's going so far so good. I've been in this position for about 6 months, but I've already gotten my level 1 admin certification, and
Fantastic.
in the midst of building a predictive churn model. So
It's amazing. How do you think, kind of starting to wrap up our conversation today and bringing all this around back to women in roles like this, how do you think that we can better inspire women's inclusion, whether that be ourselves or others around us? How do you think we could go about accomplishing that?
well, I think this kind of thing is a great start. I think visibility and just talking about the challenges, um, but sharing them and showing people, obviously representation is huge.
Yeah.
So showing what success in any of these fields looks like as a woman, talking about any of the hurdles you faced and how you've gotten past them. I know both you and I have always been very passionate about, reading and consuming, content and hearing women speak that do this kind of stuff. And I think all of that is a huge motivator. And I think we're already seeing a shift, which, is great because I look at, how many programs there are for young women and girls to really get them passionate about these subjects. And I think that's all you really need to do is just let them know that there's no reason you can't be doing this, and look at all the women who are,
Yeah.
and talking to your daughters and nieces and friends' kids and, about, you know, what cool thing in science did you do? Or like, let's do some math together, like I'm going to steal 1/8 of your birthday cake. How much is that type of things, just making it fun.
Yeah.
Um, and then, just letting them know that whatever they choose is fine, but that there's no reason not to go into some of these, historically scarier fields.
Yeah, I think one word that kind of wraps up a lot of what you just said is just awareness. Of
Yeah,
awareness of what
absolutely.
roles are out there, of what you can do, and the
Absolutely.
awareness of how others have struggled and overcome those struggles too.
Yeah. When I remember being in high school and just thinking, your career path was doctor, lawyer, engineer, etc. And I'm in Michigan, and so engineering I thought was just working on cars. I thought it was automotive. I didn't
Hmm.
even know about all the other cool ways to do
Yes.
mathy stuff, right?
Yeah.
Even though I loved math. And I was like, cars are boring. I don't want to be an engineer. And honestly, my earliest passion was I wanted to design roller coasters. And,
Mhm.
sometimes I still wish that I would have gone in that direction, even though I love what I do now. But if I had only known, like, look at all these other ways I could have been using numbers,
Mhm.
um, it wasn't really talked about,
Yeah,
all of those niche careers and things. So
for sure, for sure. All right. Well, last question, and we'll wrap up. Is there any other advice that you would give to women aspiring to be in roles similar to yours?
yeah, honestly, I would just say do it, do the darn thing. Take the classes that you enjoy, do the work that you like, and I think you'll be surprised as you get older, as you get through college and out of college, that you'll start finding more nerdy spaces where women are represented. If you just sometimes have to seek them out.
Mm.
But I think in addition to, it being a more STEM, like, female friendly STEM world, I think that we're seeing that, like, it's even more of just a nerd friendly world in recent years. And I think that's great because I like to hope that that is also giving women kind of the confidence to show up in those spaces and be in those conversations. So just like I said, just do it. Just be there and do what you enjoy. And if people give you guff about it, do it better than them. And and then then they'll learn.
Awesome. Well, thank you again, Mallory, for joining us today. This has been a fantastic Women's History Month episode for the Data Insights podcast, and we're thrilled that you were here to join us on that.
Thank you for having me.